This is Life Admin Life Hacks, a podcast that gives you techniques, tips and tools to tackle your life admin more efficiently, to save your time, your money and improve your household harmony.
I'm Dinah Rowe Roberts, a commercial and strategy executive who gets so much joy telling Siri what to do.
I'm Mia Northrop, a researcher and writer. His love affair with technology started in the 1980s when my dad brought home a Commodore 64 with a memory of 64 kilobytes.
Huge! In this episode, we interview Lynette Coulston, the owner of tech support provider iTandCoffee.
Hello and welcome to Life Admin Life Hacks. Listeners, before we explore all things tech, we'd like to encourage you to subscribe to the monthly Momentum newsletter, which will nudge you about seasonal life admin tasks and practical resources to add to your toolkit. Head to lifeadminlifehacks.com to sign up.
And while you're there, make sure you opt in to be notified when our book, Life Admin Hacks, becomes available in January, just a month away, so you'll be first to know that it's out there ready to buy.
We know that technology continues to change rapidly. There's an understatement for you. It can be really hard to keep up with best practices and the latest apps, so we wanted to chat to someone who's made it their business to support everyday people with their technology.
So in this episode, we chat to Lynette Coulston, who reveals that voice-assisted apps are her go-to time savers, and that the curve of forgetting means you really need to continue to play with your tech every day to make sure you don't forget how to use it. And no one is backing up enough. You really need to make sure you're automating it. So if you want to know what life admin tech is essential, listen on.
Lynette Coulston had a 30-year career in software development and IT, but in 2012, she left that all behind to create iTandCoffee, a business focused on offering technology support and education to residents of her local area. Through relaxed social gatherings and individualised support, she discusses technology topics explained in a friendly, understanding environment over a cuppa. Over the years, this has extended to include support and training for those in small business, for parents struggling to manage their family's technology, which we can totally relate to, for those returning to the workforce or study, and for those who just want to better understand how their technology can help them manage their day-to-day life. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Lynette.
Thank you for having me.
To kick us off today, why don't you tell us a little bit about what the most common or the biggest mistakes you see people make when it comes to the tech they use to manage their life admin and personal affairs?
Yeah, so I know in the question that you asked me that you talk about file storage, password management and accounts, and I thought, wow, that's a dry start talking about filing. Very exciting. But it is one of the biggest problems I see with people who are not that familiar with technology, people who haven't grown up with it in business, perhaps education, and even people who have grown up with it in those environments don't often understand filing. Where are their files stored? How do you manage all your files? And so often I see people who have lost files and they call me in to try and find files that they've lost. So I think it's so important for people to understand, on Windows File Explorer, if you don't know what it is, you might need a lesson. Finder on the Mac, but also to understand on mobile devices, you've got file management apps that allow you to actually use your mobile device as if it's a computer. So if you don't understand that stuff, it's really worth a lesson in that, so that you can solve that glorious mystery of where your files actually live. I so often see people who have lost files because what they've done is they rely on their recents. When you're in Word or Excel, people who have done this will know what I'm talking about. And so they've been working on a file that's in their recents, and then they come back sometime and it's not there anymore. And they never really understood where it lived. It was just in their recents. Just understanding that whole thing about filing and thinking about your filing cabinets on your devices so that you don't lose all those valuable files. So that's a really dry start, isn't it?
Well, I think that's a really good start. This topic, life admin, some people, it's not the most exciting thing in the world, but it's so crucial because we're ruled by it in a way. I think you touch on there that idea that you kind of need to have like a mental model of what your file structure is, and everything needs a home, and you need to be able to categorize things. Those categories need to be distinct so that you're like, oh, did I put it in there or did I put it in that one? Because they could be in either because I gave them weird labels. So people setting up that file structure, do you support people with that? Is that where they're tripping over?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. What I do, like I do run classes on that or help people one-on-one with that sort of stuff. And, what we always talk about is that mental image of the real world and what you do with your files, that you have filing cabinets, one or more perhaps, and you have your drawers and you have your suspension folders and your manila folders within those suspension folders. So trying to get that picture in people's heads of that's what you're doing when you're filing on a computer.
Yeah.
So when you're thinking about filing, think about that. Where would you put it if you actually had a physical filing cabinet?
There's a reason why those little icons are shaped like manila folders, everybody. They're really trying to tap you into that concept.
But it's interesting because I was trying to teach that concept to my daughter because I was trying to get her to clean up her school computer where she had files everywhere. And she didn't know what I was talking about because we don't have a filing cabinet. They're not used to it. So that's going to be an interesting dilemma for kids when they get older. Like, why are these icons shaped in this way? What are these things?
It's like a saving icon, a floppy disk.
It is. It's hilarious.
Who under the age of 35 has seen actual floppy disk in real life? But that's the little save icon.
It's actually a thing that I see with a lot of kids as well. They haven't learnt to file, as you've seen, and there's just stuff all over their desktops. And when I talk to people about that, it's like, just picture you're working at your desk and you've just got papers all over your desktop, and it's messy.
Yeah. There's a reason it's called a desktop on the computer too.
And I think it is a massive inefficiency too, the wasting time looking for documents. So Mia and I talk about having your cloud storage as a foundation of your life admin system, that if you don't put that in place, everything takes longer because you waste time looking for things.
Yeah. And similar in your mail, it's all that sort of thing of just putting it somewhere where you can find it later. If you need to keep it, put it somewhere where you can find it.
All right. So you've talked about file storage. What other common mistakes you see people make or where they trip up?
Backups. Another dirty word, backups. People don't do backups, including those kids out there. So often this time of year, I'll get that call from a mum or a student where they've spilt coffee on their keyboard or they've done something and they've lost their files because they're not backing up or as well using cloud storage so that their files are protected. Far too often people don't pay any attention to this until the disaster happens. And I just say it's like an insurance policy. You've got to take out insurance for your home and your car, and it should be the same thing for your valuable files and your photos. It's awful when people lose their precious photos.
So where should people be backing up to? Obviously, they can put precious files on cloud storage, but if they're not going to use cloud storage, what do you recommend that they use?
Look, on a Windows computer, there's a backup tool built in. So you can plug in an external hard drive. You can set it up so that it happens automatically. On a Mac, there's a product built in or a service built in called Time Machine, and it's really easy to set up. So I use both of those. I do have cloud storage. There's lots of clouds in my sky. But I also have my hard drive backup as well because, you just never know where one of them has perhaps had a glitch and stopped working. I have had to call on one or the other at times.
So, Lynette, you talked a little bit about cloud storage, but what are your favourite tech tools you use to manage life admin for you and your family?
Look, like I'm sure you have found as mums, that load of all the things you've got to manage in your lives and your kids' lives can really bring you down. And for me, it's the reminders app on my phone and my computer that is my godsend. So I would not be without that. That in combination with the voice assistant. I'm on Apple, so I have Siri. So that ability to just quickly remind myself about something and know that it will then remind me at the time that I've asked it to. I could not be without that. I couldn't manage my life, my family's life. When it arrived in 2011 with this Siri, it was just unbelievable what a relief it was for me because I was a mum of 4 trying to work full time, and every morning there'd be all these things I'd be trying to think of and think, I've got to do this today, I've got to do that today. And to be able to just unload that into Siri, into my reminders. It was amazing.
So what kinds of things? Because I think some people are like, oh, I never know what to ask Siri to do or what kinds of things I should be jotting down.
Look, it's even simple things. Often I'm busy in the middle of something, someone rings me, I think, oh, I can't take that now, I need to ring them back. Remind me to call back Joanne in 2 hours. It is things like, remind me at 7 a.m. on Wednesday, excursion for Jacob. Remind me, it's just all those things. I just need it to pop up in my face at a particular time to remind me to do things. So that is my main one that I use.
And have you customized your Siri?
Have I customized my Siri? Oh,
Your voice?
A sexy English man or something.
That's what mine is.
I've got the Englishman. I have the Englishman.
I find it really weird when I hear a male voice because I've got the female series. No, she's a girl. She's an Australian girl.
I've got the Australian voice. We'll love it. Oh, okay, so reminders.
Siri, yeah. And look, just things like give me directions to, and it will just start turn by turn directions to somewhere. If I need to put something in my calendar, schedule Pilates at 8 a.m. every Tuesday, and it just does a recurring event in my calendar, and that gets us into calendar. I could not be without my calendar. My life is in my calendar, what I've got on. And I think, for anyone, it's really worth using a digital calendar, but for anyone that does use one, make sure your calendar is set to remind you when an event is coming up. So it's not much better than a wall calendar if it doesn't have that. But with that reminder feature, with that alert feature, it's just so helpful.
You bring up a really good point there that I think people do. They don't take into account that functionality, and it is kind of a static tool, but you can have it remind you, obviously, 15 minutes before, or, those tasks. You can have them reminding when you're leaving somewhere or when you're arriving somewhere. Or I know you can trigger a reminder if you start messaging someone particular. So if you're messaging a contact and you have a task related to that person, it'll remind you, don't forget to organise this or talk about that.
Yeah, and the one where the time to leave one, where, I always sort of think about basketball on a Saturday, where I would have a reminder set to come up half an hour before, but you can set it so that it looks at the traffic and it gives you an earlier reminder if you need to leave earlier. There's some fantastic features in there. And also with the calendar, sharing a calendar with someone. So we have a family calendar that I share with my husband, and we can both pop events into that calendar. We both know what's on in the family calendar, and it's really good for the relationship because it means it's not you that is the owner of the calendar who has to tell everyone else about what's on. It means it's in their calendar, and there can be responsibility out of your hands for, people knowing what's on in the family life.
Absolutely. I think that speaks to the sharing that mental load and not one particular person being in charge and being able to share the tasks. And it being neutral territory, as you say, it's a neutral space. It's a shared space. What calendar app do you use?
I actually use a combination. My main one on the computer is one called Fantastical. And the reason I use that is on the computer very clearly shows both reminders, tasks, and calendar events on the same calendar. So you can see, with your day, what are the reminders you've got coming up at particular times as well as the tasks.
Okay.
And I love that.
Nice.
On my phone, my iPhone, I use one called Week Calendar because it has a better week at a view at a week at a view. Yeah, so I can see, I don't love the built-in calendar app on the iPhone because it doesn't give a really good week view, but this week calendar does. It's excellent.
Okay, well, we'll link out to those in the show notes for people who are not happy with their views as well. And I think when you're looking at your phone, if the day or the week view is annoying to you, or even on your computer, you want that visual of what does the month look like or the week look like. That can actually be the tipping point to getting that right. It can be like the moment when you abandon paper calendars and wall plans and those other visual things that just give you a feeling of, okay, I've got a comprehensive view, I know what's going on. Unless you can have that on your phone and feel comfortable, or on your computer, you still might have multiple systems going on. So it is important to get those tools
Yeah.
to work for you.
Fantastical also lets you do plain English. You can just type in plain English things like lunch with Jody tomorrow, and it will actually put it in for 12 p.m. tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so you can actually just use plain English and it'll decode that into an event for you, which is
I
really
love it.
good.
The AI at work.
Yeah.
And I do think it's an area where people don't invest enough energy, as Mia talked about, in making sure that they select the apps. I think people often assume they need to use the native app on their phone for their calendar and their email, or on their computer, just often default to Outlook because that's, they're using the Microsoft suite. Investing some time in setting up those foundational systems can make a big difference to your efficiency.
I agree that it's hard. If you've loved your beautiful diary in your handbag, there's beautiful ones. I loved that. And I found it a bit of a struggle to give that up at first.
Oh, I still mourn my Filofax. I still have it in a cupboard.
Yeah, but it is worth it. It's definitely worth it.
So I think we've talked a little bit about what people struggle with, but one of the questions Mia and I were actually talking about earlier today is, what about older people? Do they have different struggles? And I guess, we're talking about helping our own parents with their tech issues, and should we as patient children help, or should we be recommending them to get some professional help? What's your experience in that domain?
Oh, look, it's really hard to help your own family members, I think. It's always hard. It's hard to be patient. It's hard to spend the time. It's hard to be, I've got a direct experience of being that child that the parents ring, and every time they ring, it's like we've got to talk technology first. And it can be really difficult and draining. All I would say is, I know I talk to people who try to help their parents or are asked to help their parents, and they have the perception that their parents are really dopey when it comes to this thing. There's something wrong with them. They just don't get it. Why don't they get it? And I just say to them, they are so completely normal. In my world, that is normal. Why would you expect them to understand this stuff? They've had no exposure through their work life. They've had no exposure and I sort of say it's like you expect them to speak a language they've never heard before, and often the kids are the digital natives who have been speaking the language all through their lives, and they expect these other people to understand what they say when they speak that language. It's really important to understand that they are not as bad as you think they are. To be honest, I was helping my mum. Before I started the business, I'd be helping my mum. We bought her an iPad, and I thought, oh my God, what have we done? Because I was constantly on the phone with her trying to help her, and she was impossible to help. I'd say to people, I don't know what's wrong with her. She doesn't get this stuff. And then I started the business, and I realized, oh my God, my mum's really good. Because she was just so normal for that age group that they're just grappling with something entirely new, and everyone makes them think they should pick it up quickly.
When you were saying I was helping her over the phone, I was having flashbacks to trying to help all sorts of people over the phone with tech. It made me really respect IT help desk when you call them, because trying to explain to someone over the phone when you can't see what they can see is really, really hard. I think my first piece of advice, if you're trying to help someone with tech, is at least be there with them if you can. It takes away so much of the friction and the frustration. Oh my God, there's like grey hairs dedicated to talking my mum through setting up a password manager.
I know. But I found also the way I've had to deal with it many a time is, if you are having to do it over the phone, instead of trying to tell people, like especially if they're not finding what is on the screen, because they go into panic mode, and so they can't see and when you say left, they look right, and all of that sort of stuff. I actually found that with my mum, I would have to say, especially with my mum, read out to me what you see on the screen. What's up the top left? What's in the middle? There it is.
That's good advice. On the other end of the spectrum, we have kids.
Yeah, so I think this is how I first came across you, Lynette, was you came and did a presentation at my kids' school around setting up screen time for iPads. So we know that, managing kids' devices and particularly limiting screen time can be a huge headache. And I think something people are struggling with a lot at the moment. We're still here in lockdown in Melbourne as we're recording this. So I guess I'd be keen to know, what are your top tips? I know we can't cover it in detail in this interview, but what's if you could tell someone one thing, what would it be?
Look, I would say do make use of the built-in capabilities that you've got on say, the iPad and iPhone, for example. And there's a similar thing on Google devices, on Android devices. Make use of the screen time parental controls that they have there. Learn about them. Google them. It's amazing what you can find on Google. There will be advice on Google telling you how to set things up. And start out as you mean to continue. Before you give a child a device, set up the parental controls. There's nothing harder than removing something they've had. It's so much easier if they've never had it to start with, if they know the rules from the start. Also, what I think is just so good about those sort of tools is that they take the responsibility away from you. If you set up things like downtime where everything goes off at a particular time and doesn't become available until the next morning, and time limits, it takes away that fight that you have to have with the kids over, come on, devices off. It just happens. It just happens magically. Another thing to consider also, and we're getting into more techie territory here, but what I found really helped me as a parent was setting up the home router at home, the home Wi-Fi, to restrict access per device. You could set up profiles so that each device you could nominate what sort of device it was, whether a child or parent, and then you could set rules around what those devices can access, times of day they can access them, all of that sort of stuff, and even do it remotely. There was nothing more satisfying.
All right, tell us more about this router. What router does that? Does that come with your broadband supply, or is that a separate?
I wrote an article actually I do a fortnightly newsletter, and I put an article in there about the Telstra actually has a capability where you can set a limit across your whole internet to say that you want low, medium or high controls over the parental controls, and also lets you turn it off overnight, or, have sort of that time when the internet's just switched off. But that's household wide. So if you want to watch Netflix while the kids are in bed, then you don't really want that. But there are routers. Yeah, the one I used was a Netgear one, but there's all different ones. Netgear now has, and I actually think there's other ones that use the same thing. I think it's called Circle by Disney, where you can actually set all this up and have it all managed from an app on your phone, so that you can be seeing who's on your Wi-Fi, what sort of restriction levels you have on them. You can knock them off if they're misbehaving, all of that sort of stuff. So it's really worth thinking about that.
It sounds really useful. I think obviously on the Apple devices, screen time is great, but as Dinah mentioned, now that we're in lockdown, my kids are on laptops for school, and there's no telling when, you think they're on Mathletics or you think they're in WebEx. No, they're on YouTube, and they have been for an hour, and being able to control some of that at the router level would be great.
Yeah, and that's it. That's the thing. You can control it by type of, website, type of service, so that you can block all social media during the day. I've got that article that I did in the newsletter that I think you can also do that sort of thing. You can have homework time, which could effectively be, school time during the day, where certain websites are blocked, and that's at the service provider level, not just at the router level. So it's worth having a look at that.
That sounds useful for kids, and also for just general productivity if you wanted to block access to your own sort of social media during the day.
Yeah.
And I think for lockdown, some people might want to block internet shopping sites, because I know that there's been some people who've been struggling with that during lockdown. Maybe I need to block Amazon. So I think we have talked a little bit about the apps that you use for life admin, but are there others on smartphone or tablet or computer, browser extensions that you use that you think that our listeners might want to check out?
Anything new that's come out that's like totally awesome and original?
Now you've got me. Look, I say to everyone, get a scanning app on your phone. It's one of my top tips. You must have a scanning app on your phone. And people say to me, why do you need that? You can just take a photo of things. But a scanning app will actually, whatever size it is, it could be a massive, great big thing. It doesn't have to just fit on a scanner bed. It can be anything, great big picture, whatever. A scanning app will scan it. It will straighten it up. So you could sort of take the photo at a bit of an angle, but it will straighten it up so it is the right sort of proportions. It will crop it. It will clarify it and have it ready for you to do whatever you want to do with it. Could be to send it to someone, save it somewhere, whatever. And some of those scanning apps do an amazing job of scanning photos. So scanning all your digital photos. There's one that I use that will scan multiple photos at a time. So you can so quickly get through all your old photos, get them scanned in, and even sort of record what date the photo was taken so that it appears in your Photos app in the right order. You know how in the Photos app it shows a timeline of your photos, so you can make sure that your photos are all there in the right place. I'll tell you my two favourite. The one that I use as my go-to one day to day is one called Scannable by Evernote, or Evernote Scannable. Evernote is a digital note scrapbook sort of app, and that is one that I use as well. So that's one of my go-to apps. Scannable is part of Evernote's suite of apps, but you don't have to use Evernote to use Scannable. And it's free and it does an amazing job, always does an amazing job, and it does photos as well. And then the one that I use for scanning multiple photos at a time, which lets me set the date and all that sort of stuff as I go, is called PhotoMine. It's a paid one, I have to say. It is a paid one, but I thought it was worth the money. I paid a subscription so I could use it, and I use it all the time now.
I just downloaded PhotoMine because that's been my lockdown project. I've been scanning my old photo albums, and I'm finding it really good.
Good, aren't you?
Second endorser.
It is good. Yeah, it does an amazing job. And like, I'm often called in to help people, sadly, when someone dies and then they need to really quickly get old photos together and scanned in for a funeral book or whatever. And so PhotoMine has made that so much easier as well, because you just get through it so quickly. And then the other one I would say everyone should have, an app that allows you to fill in PDFs and sign them really quickly and easily on a mobile device. And the one that is my go-to for that is Adobe Fill and Sign. So it's amazing. I should say also, going back to the scanning app, if you're not on, Scannable is only on Apple mobile devices. So if you're on an Android device, there's lots of other options. I think it's still called Office Lens. I think they changed the name. There's the Microsoft one, which the kids use, or my son does, for doing scanning of stuff to send back to school. Office Lens is part of the Microsoft suite, and it's free. Talking cloud storage, you can scan straight into your OneDrive or your Dropbox. So if you use any of those, there's a scanner front and center on the screen for scanning documents straight into there. And there's also Adobe Scan, which is also a free one that you can use.
Great. Those are some great tips. So thanks for those.
We didn't talk passwords yet. Oh my gosh, I've just realised I skipped passwords.
So do you want to give us your top tips about passwords then before we move on to the next questions?
Yeah, I did want to talk about passwords because it's something that I deal with, the fallout of bad passwords and repeated passwords all the time. People getting caught out by phishing emails and giving away a combination of email address and password, and then they've used the same thing across multiple accounts, and then they can be hacked in multiple ways because of that. Day in, day out, I had this conversation with people. I was talking to someone yesterday, I won't mention who it is, but it's a family member who we were talking about passwords. Her passwords were appalling. They were like, name and postcode or something like that. Really easy to guess type of passwords. You must have strong passwords, different passwords for every account that you set up, because the idea of phishing emails is that they want to just get one combination because they know that you use the same thing across multiple accounts. And if ever you need proof of why it's so important, I don't know, have you heard of the website Have I Been, PWNED, Have I Been Pwned I'm not sure what it stands for.
Pwned, I believe you pronounce that.
What is it? How do you pronounce it?
Pwned.
Yeah, everyone should go there and check both their mobile number. You'd key in your mobile number, key in your email address, and you will see how many sites that have your details recorded, your email address and password or your phone number, how many of those sites have had the credentials stolen, and therefore out there on the dark web and readily available are your credentials that if you've repeated them elsewhere could be available to someone to get into your account. And it is often how people get hacked. Yeah. So in terms of passwords, my recommendation is get a safe password vault app. There's a few good ones around. Several of them have been around for a long time. 1Password is a good one. It's got the digit 1 at the start. 1Password, LastPass, Dashlane, they're all very popular ones. But even if you're because I'm Apple, I'll talk Apple here. If you're on an Apple device, your Notes app, you can lock a note. You can store confidential stuff in there and then lock the note with a passcode that applies across all your notes. People will often put their passcodes in, notebooks or on pieces of paper or put them in their contacts thinking that no one will work that out, or put them in notes without a lock. You need something where they're locked behind some sort of passcode, and hopefully a decent passcode. And the idea is then you just have to remember one passcode, not a whole heap. You just look it up. Don't worry that you can't remember your passwords. Just store them somewhere safe with a passcode.
So I think we've covered lots of the foundational parts of life admin. I think, Mia and I fully endorse all of those foundational digital tools. So what about we think about mindsets? And we talked a little bit about it before, that some people are convinced they're not techie. So what are some useful mindsets and beliefs for people to adopt to be more confident and improve their digital literacy?
One of the problems is that people who feel they're not good on technology see others using the technology and it looks so easy, and it's like, why can they do it and why can't I? What they don't realize, I think, is that the people that are able to do those things are doing it using their technology potentially a lot more than those who can't are. When I started running classes, I would get people that would come to a weekly class, and then the next week when we got together, they'd say, I haven't touched it since I last saw you. I haven't done anything. And so what I started doing in my classes, and often in appointments as well, is showing something called the curve of forgetting. It's a really good graphic because what it shows is, on the day that you learn something, you're at 100%. And then it shows this curve of what happens if you don't then revise. If you don't touch the thing that you just learnt within 24 hours, you've dropped down like 70% in terms of what you remember about what you learned. And it sort of keeps going down, so that if by day 7 you haven't actually revised and touched it again, it's gone. It's like you never learnt it. And the thing that I say to people is that's not a graphic that applies to old people or people that that are new to technology. It's a graphic that they gave my son in year 7 on his study calendar as a reminder to the kids, this is why you need to revise. Because if you don't, you won't remember what you learned. And so my message to people is, don't beat yourself up because you're not picking it up quickly, but it is a case of you've got to keep using it. You've got to continually use these things for it to get into your long-term memory and understanding. And also, I find that particularly women are very down on themselves about their ability to learn this stuff. Very apologetic. Every day I'll get someone that rings me and says, I'm hopeless. I will be the most hopeless person you have ever come across. I'll be your worst customer. And, and they'll all talk about how their kids can't stand helping them and all that sort of stuff. And I just say, look, you are normal, so don't think that you can't learn this stuff. You can. And once you actually, I often find once people realize they're not unusual, there's nothing wrong with them, it is okay, it just sort of opens the door a bit to learning, and also just making it fun. Like when we do have appointments and classes, there's lots of laughing and silly things. The men don't like it as much.
So the key there to be, to bring some self-compassion to it and realize there's no point comparing yourself to your 12-year-old or your 16-year-old who's spending hours each day in apps of all kinds, and our digital natives have grown up, probably had a tablet of some kind in their hands before they were two. Comparing yourself to that is not helpful. So it's nice to hear that it's very normal. It's a learning curve like everything else you have to learn, not a statement about your character or your intelligence.
I think it's also important that people understand, I'll hear people say all the time, oh, the kids know it all. And they don't. They know small bits and pieces that they use, but there's so many areas that they don't know. Don't assume that they know it all.
Okay, so what kinds of resources can people draw on if they find themselves needing some IT support? Do you have favourite YouTube channels or newsletters? Or talk to us about your own membership club.
Yeah, I do find that the client base that I tend to work with, they would never naturally Google something, and they would never naturally look up a YouTube video. It's just not something that comes to mind. So I'm constantly in my classes where, if someone's got a problem, I'm constantly suggesting that they Google it and telling them that actually I don't know the answer to these things most of the time. I Google it. I'm not this font of knowledge where it's just all in there and I can just pull it out. I Google. I've learned my whole business has been built on teaching myself things via Google, and anyone else can do that. And so in doing that, it's important to know how to phrase your Google questions. So we sort of talk about that a bit. I do a fortnightly newsletter that I send out, which is focused on tips and tricks for making life a bit easier with your technology or nifty things that you can do. And so, you can sort of tap into that sort of service. What I have been doing more recently through lockdown, I have a service called the iTandCoffee Club. Quite a few of my clients have joined. And the idea of that is it does get them the newsletter and tips and tricks. And depending on their membership level, they can watch videos of the classes that we've recorded. So any class that we run, we record. And so what I've done during lockdown is featured a video of the day, which I've had a lot of positive feedback on, because they're videos that were always there, and a lot of people who were members could have watched them, but they've really enjoyed just having something each day to learn across the lockdown period. Having sort of I can only watch it today and then it's gone, and so it actually forces them to sit down and watch that thing. So it's actually been really interesting. But yeah, so I am sort of trying to build up that iTandCoffee Club, because the more people I have as members, the more sorts of services like that I can offer.
And it's definitely worth something to invest your time in, because digital literacy does remain one of those skill shortages, not just in Australia, but globally, as technology keeps advancing and becoming more integral in every parts of our lives. You do need to keep up. So find your YouTubers that speak in a way or have the content related to devices you have at home, so you can look at, okay, I've got this app, I've got this device. Someone will be YouTubing a tutorial about that. Or find someone like iTandCoffee and subscribe and keep learning, keep getting exposed to all the new cool tech that's out there.
And I do find that a lot of people, they want that that personal touch, that personal interaction, and someone that they can come to and ask questions. And so, I think it is important to have a face and someone you can call, that sort of thing.
Well, awesome. Thanks so much for sharing everything with us, Lynette, today. I'm actually off to download Adobe Fill and Sign and to look up the forgetting curve. So we did talk a bit about your iTandCoffee Club, but where can our listeners find you if they'd like to join up or find out more about your services?
There's the iTandCoffee website, itandcoffee.com.au. There's a menu option that talks about the club, and you can see what videos we have available, how to make appointments, all that sort of stuff. We're actually in Camberwell, although, of course, during lockdown, not seeing anyone, but it's just been amazing through COVID that people have taken to the remote support option, have been brave enough to try that. And so I think more and more going forward, that will be our preferred way of dealing with people, because it's so powerful, the remote support option, because you can look at each other on the screen and share each other's screens. And, even actually that's something that's worth mentioning for people out there. When you're helping your parents, helping someone that needs help, make use of that, the same thing that I use for the business, the apps like Zoom. When you're on Zoom, you can get a parent to share their screen with you, even from an iPad or an iPhone, and then you can walk them through the problem. Rather than just talking about it on the phone, you can actually help them. It's worth doing that.
There's the button. There's the button. See that button?
No, down. Yeah, so anyway, so even if you're not near Camberwell in Melbourne, we've actually been providing remote support Australia-wide. And even like I did an appointment last week with someone from North Carolina in the US and another one from Chicago. So it's amazing what it's opened up in terms of possibilities for getting help, because it doesn't matter where you are anymore.
Good on you.
Awesome.
Should I say the phone number as well if you want to call is 1300 885 420.
Thanks for listening. Show notes for this episode are available at lifeadminlifehacks.com. And if you're a fan, please subscribe and share the love and tell a friend, or review us in your podcasting app. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn.